Number 21 Kentucky 2024 preview on Good Morning College Football. Hello and welcome to episode 71 of Good Morning College Football from CampusToCanton.com. I'm Nicholas Ian Allen of CFB Winning Edge and Campus to Canton. Thank you for joining us today for our preview of the number 21 ranked team in our CFB Winning Edge team strength power ratings, the Kentucky Wildcats. And probably not a surprise if you have followed a lot of the preseason rankings, predictions, projections from other outlets. We are higher on Kentucky than just about anybody else out there. So we will dig into why perhaps that is, some individual player projections that really jump off the screen for us in the Wildcats. But first, want to say thank you to those of you who are tuning in on the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We very much appreciate your support there with a like on this video, subscribing to the channel, as well as the other Campus to Canton outlets, including our podcast feed. Follow on social media, on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. Thank you so much for your support there. And then, of course, thank you to those of you who support us as a member at CampusToCanton.com. You can join for as little as $2.99 per month. That gives you access to a wide range of content, including rankings on the site for college fantasy football, C2C, Devy, also our brand new college football best ball rankings, which come in very handy if you are taking part in the new Underdog Fantasy best ball drafts that have been ongoing for the last week or so. Our team, the CFF team at Campus to Canton, and folks behind the scenes worked very quickly once we were alerted that this was coming to put those best ball rankings together to make sure that they fit the format of the game as a Power 4 only option. Also implemented easy to find bye-week schedules so that you would be able to make smart decisions and diversify a little bit, make sure you're not loading up a bunch of players who all have the same off week. So all of that is available at our lowest tiers at CampusToCanton.com, but we've got several higher tiers as well, including what we discuss for the most part here on Good Morning College Football and our team preview series, our CFB Winning Edge team profiles, our returning production database, and our stat projections, which are now available as well. Those, I believe, are helpful in those underdog drafts as well, give you a little bit of a different view, try to strip the opinion out. Basically, everything we do at CFB Winning Edge, we try to reduce opinion as much as possible and just let the numbers speak for themselves, give you another way of sort of comparing your own personal opinion, comparing what others see, added context and insight and analysis is great. Absolutely. Our CFF team and the folks at Campus to Canton are great with that. We want to offer just a little bit of a different look to perhaps unearth some value that you might have missed, to kind of give a little bit of a reality check sometimes on a player that you might be really, really excited about, but the system in place just might not have much of a track record of really producing at that particular player's position or role on the team. So we like to offer that as well. So you can join CampusToCanton.com for as little as $2.99 per month, but we very much would appreciate those of you, and do appreciate those of you that subscribe at the C2C Winning Edge and all 22 tier levels. That's what gets you access to these team profiles, stat projections, returning production database, which we will talk about today as they relate to the number 21 ranked team in our team strength power ratings. That's the Kentucky Wildcats. And Kentucky is higher in our rankings than just about anyone else. If you followed the first 20 of our team previews, we've listed a bit of a composite of other analytics, computer-based projection systems like our team strength power ratings that maybe do different weights or put in different factors. And also we compare to media members, national media members who have rankings for the post-spring transfer window, also the preseason magazines as well. So we are higher on Kentucky than just about anybody else. The next closest in that group that we refer to consistently is SP Plus, Bill Connolly and ESPN, almost as high on the Wildcats as we are. Beta Rank has the Cats 27th. Kelly Ford, the K Ford ratings have UK 31st. ESPN's Football Power Index has the Wildcats 34th. And then a few of those more opinion-based media rankings had Kentucky as a top 25 team maybe earlier in the preseason cycle, but the most recent edition of Mark Schlabach of ESPN's Power Rankings, the Wildcats had dropped out of his top 25. Similarly, Athlon Sports has Kentucky in its next tier, so sort of in that 10 to 12 teams just outside the top 25. Stuart Mandel of The Athletic listed Kentucky among the teams that just missed his post-spring top 25. And then Phil Steele, who has both a power poll that is more of the, just numbers-based, who would be favored versus who on a neutral field, similar to the way we do our power rankings at CFP Winning Edge, but also has that top 25 prediction rankings, does not have Kentucky in the top 25. So we're higher than most. And how do we see sort of where the odds lie? Kentucky, we're going to make a lot of references to our number 20 team probably in the power ratings, because there are a lot of similarities between the way our numbers see Kentucky and North Carolina. And the market, the odds makers, see these teams very similarly as well. The national championship odds for Kentucky are 300 to 1, which is tied for 35th among all national championship contenders. That's the same odds that North Carolina has that we discussed last week. Also UCF, who will be discussing pretty soon as well. So our ratings and the odds makers in the market at least have the teams grouped similarly, even if we are a little bit higher as far as the overall rankings go. But Kentucky 15 to 1 to make the college football playoff. If this, if everything clicks and Kentucky is an upper tier SEC team at the end of its season, then, maybe it would have an opportunity to sneak in as a third or maybe even fourth SEC team. Don't know how those rankings will eventually work themselves out. I'm very new, still haven't totally wrapped my mind around the new college football playoff structure, quite honestly, those 12 teams and trying to figure out, okay, how many at-large spots are going to be available for teams in each conference. I try to equate it to the FCS playoffs, but that's probably not the way to go. So we will find out if if an SEC gets 3 or maybe there's a possibility for a fourth team. I'm not sure, but I think if everything were to line up similar to how our projections see Kentucky, it's not unreasonable it's not an unreasonable goal, I think, for the Wildcats to shoot for a playoff spot, because as we'll discuss, this defense looks excellent on paper, has an opportunity to be one of the best, certainly in the SEC, maybe even in the country. And then there's some exciting pieces on offense, including some newcomers that Mark Stoops and his coaching staff were able to add to the mix to complement, one of the better receiving cores in the SEC, an offensive line that's bringing back quite a bit and added to the mix to kind of fill any potential holes as far as experience goes. So there's a lot to like, I think, about this Kentucky team. And Mark Stoops, it sounds like, likes his team as well. Last week at SEC Media Days, Stoops was, of course, on hand to talk a little bit about a wide range of topics, including his new offensive coordinator and their new faces that are going to be on the field, most notably perhaps quarterback Brock Vandagriff, the likely starter at QB for the Wildcats. Chip Trayanum at running back has an opportunity to step into a role that has been very, very productive, both as far as Kentucky having a track record of producing, very good running back stats as far as the top ball carrier, but also new coordinator and play caller Bush Hamden, who Stoops, and I'm reading some quotes here that were put together from James Fergroza of College Football Network, from Stoops at SEC Media Days. Stoops says, quote, "Wouldn't be SEC Media Days if I didn't have to talk about a new offensive coordinator. So those of you, I'm very excited about Bush Hamden. He comes to us from Boise. I've known Bush for a while, actually talked to him 3 or 4 years ago, because Kentucky's been in the market for an offensive coordinator often over the last few years. So Hamden has been part of some of those discussions, it sounds like, in the past." Continuing from Stoops here, quote, "I love the influence. He's got a background of working with Coach Eli Drinkwitz, who I have tremendous respect for. He's worked with Coach Steve Sarkisian. He's been around and did a great job at Boise, and very excited about Bush and what he's going to do." Stoops continued on talking about, wanting to some of his choices in offensive coordinator the last couple of years, when there was Liam Cohen, and then he left for the NFL, but brought in a coach with a similar background and shared history, and then that didn't work out. Cohen comes back, then he leaves. So Stoops has wanted, even though there's been some turnover at that position, does like to add some continuity or capture some continuity when possible. So continuing here, says, quote, "Tried to keep as much continuity as I could, but also wanted him to be very confident and do the things that he does to put us in position to be successful." So going outside sort of the network for the most part, but Hamden, had great success in a little bit of a difficult situation at Boise State last season. Had injuries to some key players on the offensive side of the ball, including running back Ashton Jeanty, one of the top players in college football. Basically, your number one overall pick in college fantasy football drafts this season. From just a redraft standpoint, Jeanty is the overwhelming number one pick. Not available in those underdog drafts, unfortunately. But Hamden did some things to make sure when Jeanty was available and 100% to get him the football often and in creative ways, and think that's going to translate pretty well to some of the playmakers that he'll have to work with at Kentucky. Also, Stoops discussed how aggressively Texas A&M pursued him when its head coaching job was open early in the coaching carousel, but then also spent some time talking about the depth and the talent on this Wildcats defense, where our numbers really, really like the way that unit looks. Not a lot of discussion in those quarterback pieces that we've referenced a lot over the first 20 team previews. Brock Vandagriff not getting a lot of discussion yet as a upcoming draft prospect, but the talent is certainly there, and the potential, I think, as well. David Hale of ESPN put this Kentucky quarterback room and Vandagriff as the leader in Tier 8 on his piece, where he slotted all 134 FBS quarterback situations together. Similarly, with the team that we discussed most recently, along with North Carolina, LSU, Michigan, and Maryland, a group that their players stepping into roles where, maybe big shoes to fill, but the potential is there for, I think, just as good of a season at the quarterback position, if not a little bit better, for Kentucky this year. But let's talk in a little more detail about this team, and do want to also mention, should have done this at the top of the show, but if you're a regular Good Morning College Football viewer, we've obviously gone very in-depth on team previews the last month plus, with the opening of fall camp just days away for teams that are playing in week 0, and about a little over a week for those kicking off in week 1. There's going to be a lot more news, a lot more happening to stay on top of. And so we are going to shift a little bit. We're not going to do as much of the long form team preview. So not the 40, 45-minute team previews. We're going to hit news a lot more. I do want to continue to touch on teams in our rankings as we go. We'll figure out all the details, but do expect, right around when we hit that number 25 mark, that we're going to shift focus again a little bit more as that news really starts to pick up when fall camps open. But taking a look now at the sharing my screen here, our CFB Winning Edge team profiles for the Kentucky Wildcats. Taking a look at how last season went, basically to plan as far as second order wins and those post-game win expectancy numbers go. These numbers come from collegefootballdata.com, the post-game win expectancy numbers. So if you were to play the same game 100 times, 1,000 times, however many, and the box score were just to roll over, be the same every single time, how many or what percent would you expect Kentucky to win? And those first 2 games for UK, even though the final score ended up opening up a little bit of a margin there, the box score didn't look all that great for the Wildcats. So not dominant at all in week 1 and week 2 in wins against Ball State and Eastern Kentucky, but able to really crank things up against Akron, and then the SEC opener against Vanderbilt. Also beat Florida in impressive fashion, 98% post-game win expectancy on that 33-14 victory, as the Wildcats opened 5-0. But running into Georgia and then an upstart Missouri, a Tennessee team that is always a factor, or now, under Josh Heupel, we expect to be a factor year in and year out. And I think this year is going to be the same. It's a difficult stretch. Dropped 3 in a row. Were able to get a win in very impressive fashion defensively against Mississippi State, but that very difficult schedule last season with the final season of the divisions drew Alabama out of the West. That's a tough matchup. 0% in the post-game win expectancy there. Also dropped a winnable game against South Carolina. The box score not great, but close, and certainly a winnable matchup for the Wildcats. UK did get the win in that in-state rivalry against Louisville, and then had really controlled that bowl game until late in the fourth quarter, and Clemson and Cade Klubnik came back, were able to have that game-winning drive that we talked about in our Clemson team preview. Might have actually been, though we don't put a lot of stock in bowl games, and they don't go into our team performance ratings at all. They don't go into the stats that we reference. Nevertheless, maybe that was a one bowl game from last year that could really help sort of inject some optimism for a team, build some momentum going into the offseason. On the flip side, I don't expect that bowl game to be any reason to worry about Kentucky collapsing in that game. certainly disappointing at the time, disappointing way to end the season. But we don't spend a whole lot of time here talking about motivation factors and how that sort of goes into things. But based on my own experience long ago, a little bit of a coaching background, sometimes that loss at the end of the season can be a real motivator and lead into the off season. And, we didn't finish in that game. And so, every offseason workout, you bring it back, you talk about it, build different competitive, pieces into your workouts and practices to really concentrate on finishing. So who knows, maybe that loss will actually help Kentucky or has helped Kentucky over the long off season and focus its efforts into this 2024 campaign, working to finish in games that the Wildcats should win. And looking at that post-game win expectancy number, 97%. So Kentucky gets credit for 0.97 wins in the second order win calculation. But obviously, the scoreboard is what ultimately matters, and that one went down as a loss. But even though there were some games that could have gone either way, some wins where the number was lower than 50%, some losses where it was higher, still mostly worked out. 6.66 second order wins there. So this Kentucky team was legitimately a 7-win team, between 6 and 7 wins. And that's how it played out. Statistically, nothing spectacular, not bad in any particular major stat that we focus on here, but also not elite anywhere. Look at scoring margin. Again, this is FBS opponents only in the regular season only. Kentucky kind of middle of the pack, slightly better than FBS average, 55th in scoring margin. Net yards per play and yards per play, both on offense and defense, right there, top 40, but still plenty of room for improvement. Points per drive from Brian Fremeau, BCF Toys, right there around FBS average in net points per drive at 62nd, top 50 on offense, but that was a little bit of a trouble spot defensively, ranked 77th there. Net yards per pass attempt, Kentucky was 75th, so that's certainly room for improvement. But the biggest area where the numbers were lagging, the success rate, 91st in offensive success rate, 83rd success rate against. That works out to negative nearly 3% on the net success calculations, 95th nationally, certainly an area to improve there. And then the EPA equivalent, expected points added equivalent, that we use also from collegefootballdata.com. They call it PPA. Kentucky just inside the top 60 in that margin, PPA margin. You can see the pace here. Last season, Kentucky operates pretty slow offensively. In fact, 133rd in offensive pace as far as points, as far as plays per game go, 120th in the average time between snaps. So curious to see how that compares. We do have pace projections that do include some of, do include a significant addition as far as Bush Hamden's background at Boise State over the last 3 years. So we'll actually dig into our stat projections a little bit more than we often do here. But overall, Kentucky last season was a top 40 team as far as team performance goes, 37th in our overall team performance ratings, top 50 on offense, plenty of room for improvement, but 57th passing, 63rd rushing, and actually sort of the individual rushing production, raw numbers, you could say a little bit better than that, certainly as far as your top ball carrier. Top 40 defense, pretty strong against the run, 31st there, 66 against the pass. That's an area for improvement. But as we'll discuss and actually take a look here now, the returning production if you're looking for reasons to be optimistic that those numbers are going to move in the right direction, it's because Kentucky is the number one ranked team in the SEC as far as our returning production calculations. We use the same percentages as Bill Connolly. Sometimes the numbers themselves may not match up exactly because we don't know, we don't get this in-depth view from his stuff, at least not publicly available. But the way we calculate it on the offensive side of the ball, adjusted for incoming transfers, which you can see the passing production includes not only Brock Vandagriff, who is the leading projected top quarterback, but former Rutgers starter Gavin Wimsatt, who returned home to Kentucky. Didn't put up huge numbers at Rutgers by any stretch, but helps offset a little bit of that. 2,746 passing yards that Devin Leary had for the Wildcats last season. 25 touchdowns for Leary, 12 interceptions. That hopefully, if you're a Kentucky fan, Brock Vandagriff's going to step in, take care of the football a little bit better. Also, and a very small sample for Vandagriff with 18 pass attempts across 7 games at Georgia last season, but the yards per attempt moved in the right direction for him. 9.2. You'd love to see that for Kentucky this year. My expectations and our stat projections don't expect 9.2, but hopefully that 7.5 or 7.4 that Leary had last season, you would like to see that increase a bit. If Kentucky's able to stretch the field a little bit more, there's definitely an opportunity, I think, for bigger plays on the offensive side of the ball. Adjusted defensive production that includes incoming transfers, UK ranks 11th nationally. Also would have ranked 11th in raw defensive production. That's this area here, where the Kentucky offense, because the additions of Vandagriff, Wimsatt, also Chip Trayanum at running back, who we'll discuss. Adjusting for those transfers, Kentucky took several steps forward in the national rankings. Would have been 76th just in terms of raw offensive returning production. Who's coming back, who's not from last season. Kentucky lost a little bit more, but was able to replace a good bit on the offensive side of the ball. Defensively, not as many holes. 9, I think, full-time starters returning. That means that unit, there's a lot of continuity, a lot of experience from last year's team. But put it all together, and raw returning production just based on, again, who's coming back, who's not from last year. Kentucky would rank top 35 nationally, but including those transfers, up to top 15 nationally. All right. The rushing side of the ball, Trayanum is somebody that we are going to be discussing quite a bit. The numbers, not spectacular. At Ohio State was not the starter. Also spent a little time playing linebacker early in his Ohio State career there after transferring from Arizona State, where he was a highly rated recruit coming out of high school in the state of Ohio. Was able to play early for the Sun Devils, but then transferred out, wanted to, or did so with the intention of playing linebacker, ends up coming back. And we saw some glimpses of what made Trayanum a highly rated recruit, one, but also a lot of the, Campus to Canton specifically. And a lot of the folks that dig deeper, beyond just what the recruiting sites have to say as far as those ratings coming out of high school. Trayanum was higher among the Devy set, among the Campus to Canton set, and college fantasy football as well, than more of the traditional, I guess, legacy recruiting sites were. So we haven't seen the full payoff yet, but there's hope that Trayanum really will capitalize on that talent that he's got, but also put in a position to really be successful as well. So you can see Ray Davis is going to be missed. Over 1,100 yards, nearly 200 carries in 13 games last season, had 14 touchdowns on the ground. Wimsatt certainly could provide some rushing production. He had 11 rushing touchdowns at Rutgers and nearly 500 yards on the ground, and has the ability to come in and make some plays with his feet, certainly. So curious to see. Vandagriff, it sounds like, has a big edge leading into fall camp. was, of course, able to go through spring practice. Wimsett was still at Rutgers competing with Ethan Kaliakmanis, the transfer from Minnesota, who was named the starter at the end of spring for Rutgers, transfers back. But I would expect that he'll have a role based on what he has been able to do specifically as a runner. So in short yardage, goal line situations, we'll see. But Trayanum going to be probably the primary running back. Also, Demi Sumo coming back as the leading rusher among running backs, but Barion Brown actually picked up more yards in his limited opportunities, just 12 carries, but nearly 150 yards, 12.2 yards per attempt. So little, not a ton of depth there, but I think with Trayanum and Sumo, solid 1-2 duo. That can, and Sumo's played a little bit of wide receiver as well, or was practicing there a little bit to kind of get his skill set a little more involved. So curious to see what his role will be as well. The receiving core, Dane Key and Barion Brown coming back is big. Brown targeted 87 times last season, 43 catches, led the team. Not as many yards as his teammate Dane Key or Tavion Robinson, who's moved on to a professional career. But Brown, big play ability, probably going to be his last season in college football. He is another one of those favorites of the Campus to Canton recruiting team and Debbie team, somebody that has huge potential. And you're still waiting for that huge statistical breakout, but maybe Bush Hamden is going to be able to unleash Barion Brown. Dane Key, very solid as well. Similar reception numbers on fewer targets, more touchdowns. But the addition of Jamari Macklin is going to be quite interesting. Started his career at Missouri, transferred to North Texas, where he was targeted 100 times last season, over 1,000 yards, 11 touchdowns, big play receiver, 17 and a half yards per reception. Also was targeted nearly 16 yards down the field. So similar number there to Barion Brown, where you're looking for a big play. Jamari Macklin and Barion Brown are going to be your deep threats there. Jordan Dingle back at tight end. He was limited to just 5 games last season, but productive there. 270 yards on just 12 catches. Made some big plays as a tight end. He and Josh Caddis are back. So that tight end position has some depth and experience in it as well. On the offensive line, top 4 starters are back. Top 4 as far as the snaps played last season, double-digit contributors back. Also, the addition of Gerald Mincy is key, coming over from Tennessee, and Jalen Farmer is got an opportunity, I think, to play some significant snaps as well. A lot of the reports coming out of spring indicate that he's in the mix. On the defensive side of the ball, losing Trevin Wallace early to the NFL hurts a bit, but other than him, top 5 of the top 6 leading tacklers are back, 7 of the top 9. So a lot of experience on that side of the ball. Deion Walker on that defensive line, huge returner, nearly 50 pressures last season, had 12 and a half tackles for loss, 7 and a half sacks, major impact player, future pro, somebody that this Kentucky defense is really built around. Getting Maxwell Hairston back also after he exploded onto the scene with a very productive year as well. 5 picks last season, 4 pass breakups, 6 total passes defended. Major impact players, both of them. But the addition of Jamon Dumas-Johnson from Georgia, key as well. Adding him to the mix of this experience unit makes that Kentucky defense really look good on paper. And I think have the opportunity to improve on its numbers from last season, be a top 20 defense as far as our team performance rankings go. I would certainly expect that. there might even be potential for more, maybe top 10 type potential, though it will be a difficult task for Kentucky, as we can see digging into their schedule this year. Looking how our depth chart shakes out, getting a little closer look here. On the offensive side of the ball, Vandagriff slotted in as that starting quarterback. He was a 5-star recruit when he signed with Georgia. Didn't get a ton of opportunity play, appeared in 13 games, but played fewer than 6% of the snaps last season for Georgia, even though plenty of blowout opportunities, just an average of 7 snaps per game. Trayanum getting his opportunity to be that number 1 ball carrier. Potential is very high. Hasn't been super productive in the past. Didn't get a ton of opportunity last season, but listed at 233 pounds. Is a big back, strong runner, and I'm excited to see what he can do with a heavier workload. Key and Brown, two of the top, one of the top wide receiver duos in the SEC, back for their true junior seasons, and add McClain to the mix. And that wide receiver group really looks good on paper. If you look at our position strength ratings, you can see in this right-hand column, that's the strength of the offense. Top 10 in our FBS rankings as far as wide receivers go, position strength-wise. 5th in the SEC, so still not elite tier as far as the conference goes, but absolutely one of the top 10 receiving cores in college football, I believe. The raw numbers pretty good as well. This Kentucky program has really ramped up its recruiting under Mark Stoops, and Vince Marrow is regarded as one of the best recruiters in the country. The work that they've done in the state of Ohio has been key to this Kentucky program establishing itself as a consistent threat, a winning program. Top 25 in a lot of position groups. On the offensive side of the ball, number 6 at quarterback, a lot of that has to do with Vandagriff, but still really, really talented group of quarterbacks, even though maybe the experience, maybe the production isn't quite there. And you can see how those position strength ratings go. Those are adjusted for experience and production. And right now, UK 35th at the quarterback position. The running back position, top 25 in raw talent, just 46th in position strength. But I think that unit is probably a little bit underrated, and we'll get into why when we look at our stat projections briefly here in just a bit. Top 25 wide receiver talent, top 25 at tight end, 31st on the offensive line. That number goes up a little bit when you look at position strength-wise, even though that unit didn't grade out super well. 92nd in our O-line performance ratings last season. The experience in that group coming back, an all-SEC center in Eli Cox, somebody you can build around. Believe that front five, that offensive line group is going to be improved, is going to be a better unit, going to be able to open up a lot of running room for Chip Trayanum, protect Vandagriff, and think that this Kentucky offense is going to be taking a step in the right direction this season under Bush Hamden. The defense, you can see our roster strength numbers, Kentucky 14th overall, 29th on the offensive side of the ball, but 7th as far as our defensive roster strength goes. And that has a lot to do with this group. The defensive line, 4 returning starters among a base 3-3-5 defense. A lot of guys getting playing time, led by Walker. Showed the stats earlier, just a ton of production, especially for someone who is 348 pounds, 6'6", 348. Just a huge presence, literally, but also the impact that he makes on the field is key. So Walker there in the middle, but a lot of experience, guys who played quite a bit, started a lot. Kentucky rotates a lot on the defensive line. see those snap percentages. Even though Oxendine and Silver were both starters, they each played less than 40% of snaps. But if you look at that second tier in our defensive depth chart projections, you're seeing similar snap counts, similar snap percentages among the backups, projected backups, like Ribka, Hayes, Saunders, all over 30% in snaps, but fewer than 40. So those guys stay fresh, or at least that's the plan. Play a lot of defensive linemen, and that's key, certainly in the SEC. But pretty good group to work with. The linebackers also experienced. J.J. Weaver is back. De'Eric Jackson, both of those, very experienced players in their final seasons of eligibility. The addition of Jamon Dubas-Johnson, who was a starter, 24-game starter at Georgia. He played national championship games, was injured late last season. So you can see he was limited to 40% of snaps, steps in, and immediately you expect is going to have a key role in this defense. Mark Stoops talked about his addition at SEC Media Day. Sounded like he's going to be a key piece of this defense. 4 of 5 starters back in the secondary, with Hairston the headliner. Kind of came out of nowhere a little bit, quite honestly, as far as my expectations went. But huge season. You can see double-digit production points, 14 production points added to his individual player rating. So he's in the 90s now in our video game ratings, but not the highest rated player on this defense. You can see 3 players have broken that 100 rating threshold. We do it a little bit differently than the College Football 25 ratings. But this Kentucky defense, a lot of experience, a lot of production coming back, grades out really quite well, right on the cusp of the top 25 in our defensive line performance ratings. And with everybody coming back from that unit last year, expect that there's an opportunity for it to be even better. The linebacker group, very solid, adding Christian Story as a transfer, likely to start as that 5th member of the secondary, solidifies that unit. There's less, full-time or contributor types in the returning secondary and the returning linebacker than there is on the defensive line. That makes a certain amount of sense, but there's still, experience there. You say J.Q. Hardaway, who could certainly play starter type snaps or get one of those, emerge in that role. Ty Bryant, who was very good last season as well. Both of those players played a third of snaps or more last season. Bryant started 3 games. Those guys, I think, will be contributors again this year as well. So what does it look like as far as the game-by-game projections go? Kentucky, according to DraftKings this morning, that's just all what we use to reference for our win totals and those national championship odds and things like that. 6.5 is the regular season win total posted there. Our projections are way over that. We see this Kentucky team as more of a 7.5 win team. So 7-5 is the official expectation. We also project Kentucky to come out with a winning record in conference play, 5 conference wins. And that would be an improvement over last season. And you could argue perhaps with a more difficult schedule. Kentucky does still draw some of the teams that it likes to play out of the East. South Carolina's, one of the lower tier SEC teams in our projections. There's still a lot to like. Lenore Sellers, very exciting quarterback prospect, but getting that matchup in week 2 and getting it in Lexington gives Kentucky an edge there. So we have the Wildcats as big favorites against Southern Miss in week 1, as more than a touchdown favorite in week 2 against South Carolina. It gets difficult very quickly. Georgia, even though it's at home, that is going to be a very tough matchup, of course, for the Wildcats. Not a double-digit underdog there. So that, do expect that Kentucky is going to play Georgia tough, won't be intimidated, but, getting that game early probably not going to build up a 5-0 start this season like the Wildcats had last season. Also, in those first 5 games, Kentucky is got the potential to perhaps drop 2, with Ole Miss being there at the end of September. Trip to Oxford, going to be very tough. Our numbers love Ole Miss, as you may know. Top 5 in our power ratings. We're very, very high on the Rebels this year. And that Ohio team, even though we do have Kentucky as a big favorite, that is a winning program, double-digit wins last season, a lot of bowl games, a lot of turnover for the Bobcats. So it's still, Kentucky's going to have a big talent edge in that game. But 3-2 is probably that outcome, in the month of September, those first 5 games, that if Kentucky is able to pull off an upset against Georgia or Ole Miss, then I think college football playoff is definitely in the realm of possibility, because that means Kentucky's probably going to be shooting for 9-3, 10-2, something like that. Not necessarily my expectation, but if the offense really clicks early, if Chip Trayanum can be that bell cow running back, if the defense truly is a top 10 unit nationally, that defensive line plays as good as its potential, as a top 10 unit, hey, it potentially could happen. And then that middle part of the middle part of the schedule is perhaps where Kentucky is going to be able to build some of that momentum. Vanderbilt, definitely our lowest rated team in our SEC power ratings. Expect Kentucky is going to be able to get past the Commodores. The trip to the Swamp will be, of course, very difficult, but Florida in a situation where Billy Napier very much on the hot seat. What is going to be, what are the vibes going to be in Gainesville mid-season? That's certainly a winnable game for the Wildcats. We do have Kentucky as a slight favorite in Gainesville, and that one could go either way. But there's an opportunity or the potential there that perhaps Florida is already in a bad spot and looking to make a change at its head coach there. We'll see. We'll see what happens midway through the season. Getting Auburn at home is going to be a tough matchup. Do expect Auburn to be a better team this year, but certainly a winnable game for Kentucky, and we do have the Wildcats favored. We do not have Kentucky favored against Tennessee. Kentucky is higher in our power ratings, but getting that game in Knoxville is key to the Vols and its new quarterback, Nico Iamaleava. So that one is certainly a toss-up, could go either way, a winnable game for Kentucky, but that is a particularly tough draw. I don't honestly love the way the off weeks stack up for Kentucky. In addition to just some really, really difficult opponents with Georgia in week 3, Ole Miss in week 5, at Tennessee, Texas in Austin in the SEC finale. There's certainly some tough draws, but if you're going to play a schedule like this, you would hope your off weeks would kind of line up to where you get a little extra time to prepare for some of your tougher opponents. And it works out in a little bit of the opposite way for the Wildcats this year. They get the off week before Vanderbilt, who, there should be easiest conference opponent. And then an off week before FCS Murray State. You don't need the extra time to prepare for that opponent. So that, if we're going to be nitpicky, perhaps on the schedule makers or however it came together for Kentucky, that's less than ideal. But still, an extra week to maybe get healthy, build some momentum. Pardon me. Build some momentum by taking care of business against Vandy and then against Murray State as well. Perhaps then that'll lead into, those tough road games at Florida, at Texas. But then, of course, the regular season finale against Louisville, another toss-up game, another game in which Kentucky matches up quite well talent-wise Getting the draw in Lexington is good, but a lot of games could go either way. Our win total projections, similar to those post-game win expectancy, second order wins that we discussed. Kentucky gets credit for 0.97 wins, being a 31.5 or nearly 32 point favorite against Southern Miss in week one. That is, almost an automatic win, but going through, there are a lot of games where the numbers are much, much closer, favored against Florida, but 52% in the projected model there, favored against Louisville, but 53%. So add those up, probably going to win one of those games on average. But this Kentucky team has the potential to win more coin flips than it loses. They'll just have to avoid those games where they outplay the opponent like they did against Clemson in the bowl game, and come out on top there. Looking at our Talent Edge projections, our Prism spread, our projected scoring margins, Kentucky would be favored in our Talent Only model, that Talent Edge projection, and in our Stats Only model, our Prism projections, more than half the time. So in a pretty good spot in a lot of the same matchups talent-wise. Florida has a slight talent edge according to our numbers, but Kentucky holds maybe a little bit of a surprising talent edge against both Auburn and Tennessee, the way our numbers project. These do have a slight home field advantage adjustment. So that's the only other factor besides the talent only for the talent edge and the stats only for the Prism models. But stats only, Kentucky consistently a team that plays better than its talent profile would suggest, even though it's a pretty talented roster, especially on the defensive side of the ball and at some key offensive positions. But Kentucky would be favored if we're looking only at our team performance and other stat numbers in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 games, and think they'll have an opportunity to win some of those where they're a slight underdog. Louisville, certainly. Tennessee is definitely on the winnable game list, even though that might be an upset once that game kicks off. So a lot of winnable games here for Kentucky, but a very difficult stretch. I did tease a couple of times or mention, wanted to show our stat projections, and the big reason why. So Kentucky and these Prism rankings are based on that stats only. So based on all this, which probably too small to read there on the screen, but know that coaching history goes into it. We look at a 3-year window for the play caller, the head coach in these ratings. But the thing that jumped out to me, based on play caller history, based on the last 3 years for the Kentucky program as a whole, for the head coach Mark Stoops, because we do look at team specifically, head coach specifically, and play caller specifically. If there's some overlap there, then the weights go up a little bit. But nevertheless, what really jumped out to me was this running back 1 projection, which is Chip Trayanum, we expect. I am planning to go back and put specific names in here, by the way, but for our sort of updating purposes, we went through and just made it quarterback 1, running back 2, etc. But 200 carries, which is in line with what we saw last season with Ray Davis. 1,178 rushing yards, definitely within the realm of possibility. Average nearly 5 3/4, 5.77 yards per attempt is in line again with what we saw in that window for Kentucky, what we've seen under Bush Hamden as well. Touchdown number perhaps quite high, especially if Wimsatt becomes a ball carrier in those goal line situations, which based on his past production, I think is definitely a possibility. Relatively high receiving numbers. A lot of that has to do with Hamden and again, Ashton Genty and how getting him the football. So maybe we're being a little optimistic here on what we expect Chip Trayanum's role to be. But again, taking out opinion, This has nothing to do with what I expect to see from Chip Trayanum. This is what that Kentucky history is. Mark Stoops is a head coach, but also Bush Hamden and his use of running backs, where you can see Genty, also Cody Schrader in 2022 before he fully broke out, but had a nice solid season there. Tyler Beatty at Mizzou in 2021 had excellent numbers as a rusher, but also we do include receiving from the running back position as well. Last season, Davis put up great numbers as a receiver, and Genty, even better from a yardage standpoint. Not quite as good from a touchdown, but that the way they use Beatty in 2021 as well. You could see the numbers are quite high on Chip Trayanum. In fact, looking at our overall running back projections, Kentucky running back 1. If we're looking at CFF scoring in a PPR, points per reception league, number 2 among running backs. So Trayanum is not going to be number 2 in any CFF ranking that you're going to see. The CFF guide at Campus to Canton, which is an excellent publication. You should check it out if you have not already. Not going to have Chip Trayanum as a top 2 or even top 5 or maybe even top 10 running back. But looking at the production profile, historically speaking, at Kentucky and with its play caller Bush Hamden, the potential is there. So you could argue, maybe we should turn down the expectations a little bit, turn down the projections just a little bit. Yeah, maybe. But just taking out the opinion piece of it, it's a pretty good spot for Chip Trayanum there, especially how it stacks up nationally speaking. So with that in mind, that's going to wrap it up for us. We're high on Kentucky, right on the fringe of a top 20 power rating and power ranking. Certainly going to be very difficult with that SEC schedule, especially getting Georgia as usual, but also Ole Miss and Texas. Tough draws. They what would have been, traditionally speaking, West Division, no longer divisions, of course, but it's going to be a tough schedule. Going to play a lot of those, teams with playoff and SEC championship expectations. The top 3 teams, a lot of folks would say, or 3 out of the top 4, probably according to most at this point in the offseason: Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas. But a lot of winnable games in there as well. So, are we too high on Kentucky? Perhaps, but I do think that this is going to be a dangerous team. And again, like we talked about with our North Carolina preview, when we take opinion out of the mix, there's a lot to like based on past performance, based on the talent on hand. Certainly some questions at the quarterback position when you're relying on a first-time starter, but a lot of talent to work with at that position, at running back, but proven pieces elsewhere on offense, the wide receiver corps specifically. A lot to like about the offensive line, and that defense, looks like a top 10 unit on paper, talent-wise, production-wise, experience-wise, and think they have the potential to play like a top 10 unit also. So very tough matchup for any SEC opponent. 7+ wins is our official projection. But if everything were to line up, Kentucky were to win all those coin flips, which is difficult for any team. But the path to 9 wins and maybe being a sneaky, dark horse playoff team, or certainly somebody that others are going to have to go through to make the SEC championship game, to make the playoff, Georgia, Ole Miss, and Texas, most notably. This Kentucky team is going to be tough to beat week in and week out, I think. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you for joining us today. Thank you for giving this video a like. Thank you to those of you who the Campus to Canton YouTube channel. We very much appreciate that. Stay tuned for more details on how Good Morning College Football will continue to evolve, especially as those fall camps start up very soon. Looking ahead to week 0 of the college football season, which is almost 1 week away. We're 33 days, I think, from the start of the 2024 college football season. So that means fall camps are opening up very, very soon. We'll be on top of that news here on Good Morning College Football. We'll dial back these team previews just a bit in the coming weeks, but stay tuned. The rest of this week, we will continue with those previews. And our next one is coming up on Wednesday. So please do join us there. Until then, have a wonderful start to your week and take care.